Start proceedings. Excuse me, we'll start proceedings now. Thank you for joining us for this webinar on renewable energy, which is brought to you by Farmers Weekly. My name is Janine Ryan, and I'm the editor of Farmers Weekly. The burning question we hope to answer in this webinar is whether renewable energy is indeed feasible for farms. So South Africa is currently struggling under the burden of severe blackouts, as everyone here is well aware of. And the answer that government has given us to this problem is that we should invest in renewable energy. However, for anyone who's ever gone this route, you may know that it is an expensive endeavor. And while government has tried to make it more affordable by various tax breaks, as announced during the budget speech, it still requires extensive capital outlay, especially for farmers who need more electricity and greater battery storage capacity than urban residents. So in this webinar, we speak to experts in the field to try to gauge how practical the installation and the implementation of renewable energy solutions are on farms. Our panelists include Dr. Koos Coetzee, a regular Farmers Weekly contributor and an independent agricultural economist. We also bring you Kalani Siweya, head of the Economic Center of Excellence at AgriSA, and Chris Scooter, director at Green Power Solutions company Sonfin. So we'll start off with a presentation by Dr. Koos Coetzee. Chris, I'll give over to you for now. Actually, before we carry on, just in terms of the Q&As, we're going to leave the Q&As until the end of the discussion. So if you have any questions, please just type them into the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and we will hopefully get to answer your questions by the end of the webinar. Okay, Chris, over to you. Okay, it seems that Chris is having some trouble with his microphone because I can't hear him. So I'm going to assume that there's some technical glitch there. I think just then for the time being, let's go to you, Kalani. And hopefully Chris can sort out the microphone and we'll get to him a bit later. So Kalani, I think maybe just start with why people should invest in renewable energy, or indeed if people should invest in renewable energy.
Yeah, good morning, Janine, and thank you so much for this opportunity. Quite excited in ventilating some of the solutions and just some of the conversations around this important topic. I think it is quite clear, as you preceded and mentioned, that we are facing one of the worst energy crises in the history of South Africa as it stands. We know how devastating this has been to the agricultural sector in particular. And this is especially on the backdrop of the fact that the sector is quite energy intensive and irrigation reliant in this regard. So when you're having these outages, as we are seeing them, sometimes even to levels of like stage 6, it has a dire impact on just the viability and sustainability of the sector going forward. Just as a way of statistics, we know that the sector is spending about 7.6 billion rands, which is about 4 to 5% of the total cost of input when it comes to electricity in South Africa. Now, when you do have these disruptions, the number does really go higher because of the alternative plans that you need to make. We are seeing farmers needing to either buy diesel to run an alternative energy source, which could be a generator in this regard. In some of the numbers that we have crunched as AgriSA last year, we noted that between the first 9 months of 2022, which is January and September, load shedding had costed the sector close to about 23 billion rands. And this was even before load shedding escalated to levels stage 6, which we saw in the latter part of the year, around November, December. So that number will also escalate from that particular point in December to the current stages where we are right now. So renewable energies then become even more attractive as an alternative in this particular regard, because then we're now speaking to reliability of electricity, and this is what the farmers have been saying, that they need more reliability and consistent supply of energy in this regard. I know that we've got our expert and our colleague, Chris, who works directly with the farmers and will maybe speak to the technical side of things. But from a principal point of view, I think renewables stand to be that solution, at least in the short term, to help the farmers at least cushion themselves from the impact of load shedding that we're seeing right now, particularly in the time where we have little to no clarity as to what would the future landscape look like in terms of energy supply in the South African context from our power utility. Yes, you have also pointed out to the fact that it is quite costly in this regard. But from where we stand, and as a matter of principle, we believe that this is an investment that is worthwhile for the farmers themselves to continue in a sustainable manner, but also just to ensure that food security does not come under threat in this regard. Let me not maybe hog on to that particular point, and we'll just ventilate the matters as we go through the webinar going forward. Thank you, Jenny.
Connie, could you also perhaps just elaborate on the interventions that are being made by government? So in the government gazette, when they were talking about the state of disaster and the interventions that they were going to make, I was quite disappointed by the fact that everything they were talking about really came down to the affordability factor. And if municipalities therefore can't afford it, these interventions, then you know, it seemingly won't happen. So perhaps just elaborate a bit on the different interventions and whether you think we'll actually see some sort of push towards implementing them.
Yeah. So look, the government gazette, as it came out, we still think that it was quite vague in some of the clarity around the technicalities of some of those legislations that they put out. For one, they did mention that certain industries or certain parts of the economy will be considered to be essential and therefore excluded from higher stages of load shedding, or if any load shedding at all. And here they mentioned things like food production and stuff. And that is very broad. There's a whole lot of definitions that can come out of that, which I don't want to maybe dwell too much into those. But out of that, it then doesn't really speak to saying then what then happens for those that are not covered by those definitions. We did note in the budget speech, there's also been a diesel rebate kind of incentive that has been placed to say if you are currently going to be purchasing diesel for the purposes of electricity or electricity generation, then you can claim for that particular diesel. Now, it is worth noting that this particular rebate has always been in place for the agricultural sector, where farmers are able to claim on diesel rebate for tractors, harvesters, or any vehicles that are not on the road, but also for the purposes of producing electricity. Now, what this new rebate that has been announced by government does, it just extends to the other side of the value chain, which is not your processors along the value chain in this regard. But now, when you then delve into the technicalities and the detail there too, you then realize that it's not an easy win. It's not as simple as they made it to seem, because the current diesel rebate structure that is in place speaks to those particular agents that are participating in this being VAT registered. Now, the new one, we do not know if it's going to take the very same complexity, whether you need to be VAT registered in order for you to claim. But if that is the case, then we have a situation where the smallholder farmers or those that are not VAT registered can be missed from this particular rebate. So there's a whole lot of unclarity. There's a whole lot of vagueness in the current legislation that we think that it still needs to be belted out. But also on the renewable side of things, there's still been applications that have been made to NERSA in terms of the feedback rates that are tariffs that have been applied for from a NERSA point of view. that is still outstanding. Those are still some of the challenges that need to be that we still need to get over as a sector in order for us to kind of really fully realize the benefits of renewable energies. And I see Chris is also agreeing with me there, not nodding his head. He knows the frustrations. We work on these things on a day-to-day, trying to get over those hurdles. But yeah, so as it stands right now, there are legislations. They're still quite vague. They're still quite unclear. But luckily, we are having engagements with the new Minister of Electricity, where we're asking for those clarities, where we're asking that these red tapes be removed, even if from a regulation point of view, from the regulator, if it's just the speeding up of these particular tariff applications and so forth and so on and so on. Yeah, thank you, Jenny.
Thank you, Kalani. And then just finally, I think in the budget speech as well, the Minister of Finance announced that there would be some tax breaks for the installation of solar power, for example. Do you think those tax breaks go sort of far enough to actually offset some of the cost of installing solar? Because the amount seems fairly low to me.
Yeah, look, it's a catch-22 situation. On the one side, yes, you may think that it does help the farmers or it does help the businesses in cushioning the impact or the cost of starting a renewable energy self-generation plant, for example. But the unfortunate thing, and again, it goes back to those unclarity when it comes to the legislation, is that if it's going to go through a SARS process, then it means that you may only realize or claim back from that at the end of a tax season or tax year. And that could have implications on your cash flow currently. And we do know that the agricultural sector is a sector of very thin margins. And in the past couple of years, the sector has been dealing with many challenges, whether it's from an input cost side of things, whether it's pricing, whether it's logistics or any other kind of things. So on the one hand, yes, it could benefit the farmers, it could benefit the business at the end of the tax season, but as a cash flow on a day-to-day, it could still present a problem, particularly for those that do not have a good balance sheet that can carry these costs throughout the year leading up to the end of the year.
Okay, thank you, Kalani. I'm sure we'll come back to you during the course of the conversation. Chris, I think, is your microphone working now?
I think I'm back with you now. Thanks.
Okay, perfect.
I told you yesterday that I'm BBC, so
okay, so Chris, we'll go through your presentation now. Yeah, we'll say that. Cool.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I think if you can put that slide up, that first one, if possible. Okay. What I've done, I didn't go into detail about the impact of load shedding. We know it's terrible. I've just had one quote there, and that is from the governor of the Reserve Bank, which said, well, 2 percentage points down on the GDP, and the second point is that food inflation is running 13+%. That's one of the impact on farmers specifically, and this was quoted by the minister, Dr. Dadisa. She said that small-scale farmers have an additional cost of 10,000 or more per month, and for commercial farmers, it can be 100,000 rand a month. That's the cost of the extra fuel. That's not the cost of lost production, all the other costs that's into the system. This is just a basic. Now, I've got one example there, and this is a small abattoir in the rural areas. Usually an electricity bill of about 250,000 rand per month. The last few months with the high load shedding prices is running also a 300,000 rand a month diesel account. So that's the impact of load shedding. Now, if we can go on, what about the future? Will it get better or will it get worse? And if we can have the next slide. I did talk a bit. Yeah, can I just have that? Yeah, that's one. Yes, I talked a bit about with some of my engineering friends about systems and system reliability. And they all tell me that any complex system have reliability that looks like a bathtub. You have a small period in the beginning when infant mistakes or things are sorted out. Then you have a long period or normal life or low constant failure rates. And then at the end, you get the end of life wear out phase. Now, the point is, the better your maintenance of the system, the longer you can stretch that bottom of the bathtub. You can find examples all over the world. You can look at the car, a 1948 model car that's still running perfectly because it's being maintained, and you can get a 2020 model that's finished because it wasn't properly maintained. This is the point. And now, unfortunately, we know that proper maintenance was not done on the Eskom system. There's no doubt about that. I've heard that from many people in and outside Eskom. So I can go on. So what we now see, now just one back, maintenance can extend the useful life. It didn't happen. So what's the implications for farmers? The first implication is standby systems you have to have in place. We know in the dairy industry, dairy farmers many years ago invested in standby systems. It's not so easy for a large-scale irrigation farmer to have standby systems. It will cost millions. I've seen estimates from friends of mine who's irrigation farmers in the Northern Cape, and it's very. Then the second is implement strategies to get off grid, to supply your own energy. Now that is a small sentence, but it's a very complex problem, and I'm not trying to move into the area of the engineers and the people but to my mind, photocells produce electricity in daytime. At nighttime, it doesn't produce. So you have big problems there. Then the elephant in the room nobody's talking about. If I have a company or a factory and I sell products and I have a fixed cost and variable cost, if I sell less, my fixed cost per unit increases, my cost increases. Now, I heard the Minister of Energy or Electricity, whatever, said that we must lower the demand. If we lower the demand for Eskom by getting off-grid, by doing our own stuff, the price of Eskom energy will increase much faster. Bear in mind that Eskom can. They asked the NERSA for a tariff increase. NERSA said, sorry, I can't give you X%, I'll give you only that. Next year, they go back to NERSA and said, listen, here's our figures, you actually gave us too little. We need to claw back on that. So Eskom electricity may even become unaffordable. Yes, I think I'm more or less, okay. Okay, aspects to consider. I think if a farmer obviously farmer's budget for whatever he. Now in his budgeting, I've just tried to mention some factors that must be included. Further Eskom tariffs, I don't think we'll see increases below double digits. The further reliability will be lower, so you must get that in. Now, alternative systems, there are, to my mind, about 4: photovoltaic, wind, biogas, hydro. Incidentally, we see very little on the biogas development in South Africa, whereas we visited Europe a few years ago, there were smaller dairy farms, 160 cow units, producing biogas, converting it into electricity and for their own use and selling the excess electricity into the grid. In fact, there were some of those dairy farmers who made more money from the electricity from the biogas generation than from the dairy farm. Hydro, there are some places where it's being used, but that's very small. So we have photovoltaic, wind, biogas. Capital cost, all these systems are very expensive. And also, unfortunately, we are now in a market where there are shortages, so prices are sky high. Then you must consider the useful life of the components. The batteries, depending on quality. Photovoltaic cells, we really do not know how long these things are going to last. And also the maintenance cost of the system. Remember, if you put in an electricity supply system on your farm, you've added another job to your already high load. You're now the manager of a power station as well. So just bear in mind that maintenance cost of the systems. And then the most important one is that financial planning thing. And also just up to cost of capital. We hear about special schemes, special financing schemes. In many cases, in the past, in most cases where I looked at some of these things, it was actually only an ordinary bank loan, nothing special, maybe slight lower interest rate. Interest rates, that's a difficult one. Repayment period, obviously, if you can, the repayment period to the life of the equipment. Then security needed. I mean, farmers already have, in general, reasonably high debt loads. So now you still on a farm have to go and borrow another 5 or 6 or 10 million rand. That increases your debt. That obviously increases your risks. And as I said, you get tax relief, but tax relief doesn't pay that. Very important for farmer, can you afford the capital and interest payments? Can you afford it under normal conditions? Can you also afford it if product prices decrease? So I don't see very, a bright light and an easy way of doing this. This is a difficult thing. It's very expensive and it will cost us a lot of money. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Sorry, I don't know my video. Okay, so I think we'll probably get back to you as the conversation develops, but we'll turn to Chris now, just because we were talking, or Chris was specifically talking about implementation costs. So could you elaborate on sorry, I was reading there. Could you maybe just elaborate on what the process is in terms of installing, let's say, solar on a farm? Like, what are the steps that farmers need to take to get started? What do you guys do to help them?
Hi, Janine. Hi, everybody. Hi, panel. Yeah, Janine, so there was a lot now said about, from Kulani and Koos, and yeah, I would like to get to some of the points that Kulani just pointed out, and then some of the points that Koos pointed out as well. But that's good points, and we need to chat about it. But first, let's go back to the question that you asked me. So first, one thing that we need to look at it is the connection point that we want to connect the system to. If we're looking at municipality connections, there's a different process that needs to be followed. They've got their own plan, own thing in place. Yeah, they're running their thing. So then you've got your Eskom connections, where they run their processes, their applications, their approval processes, and the two differ totally from each other. They don't talk to each other. They don't have the same thing. They don't have the same mindset. So it's two total different stuff. So on the agricultural side, you will see that 90% of your farmers are connected onto the Eskom network, 10% are connected on the municipality network, and then again, there you need to split up what's happening. So let's just chat quickly about the Eskom. Okay, I'm going to chat about the municipality because that's quick. So not all of our municipalities, I think that I can count on my one hand how many municipalities are allowing you to feed back onto the grid. They have a tariff plan in place, a feed-in tariff plan in place. You can work on that just a quick one. If you look at Tshwane, you can feed back onto the Tshwane grid. They will pay you 10 cents for feeding back onto the grid. Yeah, so it doesn't help for you to feed back. Of course, the system of a solar system is costing you around 45 cents for installation. So you're losing actually anything that you feed back onto the grid. If we look at Cape Town, Cape Town's got a nice feed-in package that they've got in place, haven't been implemented yet. You need to look at certain stuff that needs to be done, certain stuff that needs to be in place, certain contracts that need to be signed, a meter that needs to be installed, and administration costs that need to be added. So yeah, that's not yet looking bright on the bright side, but at least they've got something in the media, they've got something and they're moving ahead, and they are helping us towards that. Let's go back to Eskom. Eskom is where 90% of all our farmers is connected onto, and there is a process that needs to be followed. So Sonfin is now 12 years in the market, where we've been doing EPCs for farmers. Our company were the first company in South Africa that got a system connected onto the Eskom grid successfully with contracts in place, where the farmer feed back onto the grid, receive these credits onto that account. And so, yeah, so I can tell you exactly what happened from that process where we started up until now. So we thought, okay, 12 years down the line, everything is going to be perfect. Things are going to run smooth. No, things is not running smooth. Actually, there's more processes in place, more stuff in place that you need to look at if you need to connect onto the Eskom grid. Previously, we had only one connection point, so it was only called the medium volt connection point. At least Eskom gave us the opportunity now to connect onto the low voltage side. The process on the low voltage side is still a long process. We're looking at anything between 3 to 6 months for approvals to be in place, contracts to be signed, the system then to be built and connected. That's not where it stops. We've got so many examples in the market currently where we've got systems connected onto a low voltage side. The system is connected, the approvals, this contract's been signed, everything is in place. Now we're struggling to get the accounts out of Eskom because they don't know how to process their accounts. So just to get back to stuff that Chris said is, if you do all this stuff and you got the system installed and the system is running, it's generating power, everything looks good, your system is running, you still have administrative problems on the outside, on the back of the system, where you need to go back to Eskom, because if your account bill is not up to date, and if your account bill is not showing that you've got a solar system connected onto and it's feeding back, you're not getting your investments worth. You can have that system running, it will produce energy, you will have 50% of that energy that you can use, but the investment sum will never work if the feed in of the energy into the grid is not on your bill. And that's where the problem starts now. So we've got a lot of EPC companies on the outside that firstly will not follow the process because they don't want to wait 3 to 6 months for the approval to be in place, for the contracts to be signed. So what will they do now? They will connect the systems. We have a lot of problems already occurring. Again, I'm going to elaborate on course. Maintenance side. Because of that system that's not connected with the legal side of Eskom, there can stuff happen with the farmer because that EPC doesn't know how to maintain that system. The farmer doesn't know how to maintain that system. So we've got a lot of challenges. Still, after 12 years, still lots of challenges on the outside. If we look at a medium volt system, that's your biggest system, that's systems at 500 kilowatt up to a megawatt. Systems, we're looking at 12 months for connections. Anything between 12 to 18 months connections on that side. It's working. We've got lots of mega farmers. I'm not going to tell names now, but big farmers on the outside that's connected on the medium volt side, and it's going well. Thank you. I can give positive feedback on that. Their systems is running well. They get their investments running. The first system is feeding back onto the network. The Eskom bill is running perfectly. They do get their credits in the red time, in the yellow time, in the green time. So yeah, it's running. So it's positive. Exactly the same on the low voltage side. We've got lots of systems that's connected and it's running. It all depends on the guy that you're working with Eskom, if they want to do or help you. As soon as they do want to help you, the systems are working out. We are looking at payback periods on all our systems, small systems, big systems, anything from 5 years up to 8 years. There's nothing like a 3-year payback term or 2-year payback term on the systems. I promise you that. You will look at 5+ years for your payback systems. Just to go back to Kulani on the SARS thing, just to add to that, we don't even, if we get to the customer, show the SARS thing on our presentations. 90% of our farmers isn't at this stage in this economy that's going on, load shedding that's going on, problems, flooding, all that stuff going on. They don't make profit. They can't make profit. There's no way that they can't make profit. So the SaaS thing will not work for them. So now you've got your EPCs. They work this thing into the financials, into the cash flow. They show the farmer this beautiful thing that's happening, but it is not working. The government is saying, yes, I'm going to give you extra percentage on your tariff on that side. But if I'm not making profit, I'm not going to use it. I'm not going to make profit in the next 3 years. So yeah, that's a big problem. They're not really helping us on that side. To go to Koos quickly, on maintenance, Koos, you've got it straightforward there. If you're not having a company that's helping you with maintenance, you've got problems. You've got extra problems running towards you. You as a farmer need to produce food. You are there producing food. You're not there as an engineer want to do solar system or check on your energy or check if your system is running, or whatever the case may be. So that is as well a factor that you need to put in place if you run with an EPC that is not going to help you on that side. So that's a factor running towards problems at the end of the day. Just on a comment that Koos made about that the solar systems is only working when the sun is shining. We were at a couple of farmers meetings where some of the jokes came out that people told them if it's full moon, Koos, the system is still working, or if you've got a big spotlight on the solar panels, it's still working. So maybe if you at night got problems with load shedding, you can add a spotlight on your solar system, it will work. Janine, just to go about on that as well, then you need to load shedding time. As soon as your system is connected onto your Eskom grid, you've got a grid tie system. Eskom then implements load shedding. As soon as they implement load shedding, your system is off as well. It does not work. So now I need to go and have a plan A, B, and C in place. So what do? Do I go to generators? Do I go to batteries? Because you need a source for the solar system to work if load shedding is implemented. Again, now what's happening? Now we've got everybody, they're running to the farmers. And what are they selling to the farmers? They're selling fear and they're selling panic to the farmers. Get off grid, install batteries. Eskom is not going to be there. You're going to lose your network. You're going to lose your farm. So now what? We've got this problem where everybody's want to have batteries installed. They don't know how batteries is working. You're on a farm, you're doing irrigations. You don't know when you want to start your pivot. Now, I've done my research. I see that I need a certain size of battery that needs to run my pivot. But we're working with nature. sometimes it's raining, sometimes it's not raining, sometimes we've got good sunshine or whatever. Now we're working that battery system. On our investment, we said you're going to have 10 years, you pay off your battery system. But what happens now if that is not the case happening on physically on your field? What is happening there? So what do we need to do as farmers, and what do we need to do as EPCs? We need to sit back and we need to say to our farmers, let's have a big picture of what is happening with electricity in South Africa. Let's work towards something. Let's start with a grid tie system. Small, bam. We can on some way get cash to install a solar system. Afterwards, connect a generator, because you can connect your solar system to the generator. And as soon as load shedding is implemented, your generator is starting. And with certain systems in place and certain generators in place, you can have your generator running at 15% and the other 85% and then can come from your solar system. A quick example, I've got a farmer in Ladysmith, the 350 kVA generator is running with his solar system. So before we did the integrator with the generator and the solar system, he was running roughly a 92 liters per hour on his generator through load shedding. As soon as we implemented the generator with the solar system, that dropped down to 52 liters per hour. So just quickly do a cost, that was a saving of 53,000 Rand. A generator with a solar system can run longer than what a battery system is going to run. But you do have problems. Now I get to package farmers where they need to pack their stuff. They've got scales and everything implemented. As soon as Eskom is implementing load shedding, everything shuts down. Your generator can't do that smooth overrun like what a battery is doing. So what we do now is, let's install a small battery system that runs for 30 minutes or whatever. Just that we have that overrun through changeover, everything is smooth, and then you run your generator from that. So what I'm trying to say is, we need to relax. Yes, like Kulani said, this is our biggest energy problem that we ever had in South Africa. But don't go out and sell fear or panic to a farmer. What I'm saying to the farmers is, don't panic, don't fear. Sit down, relax, look at your stuff, check out what you want to do, where you want to be, and then sit down with the right guys. Don't just only sit with an EPC. Get everybody in. Get Kulani in from Agri SA. Get everybody and then sit around a table and chat about your investment, because your investment can be anything from R1 million up to 12 or 15 million Rand. That's big money that we're talking about. That's not a decision I'm going to make for the farmer in a week's time or in 2 weeks' time or even in a month's time. That's big money we're looking at. Just sit back, relax. We are in that crisis now. We need to get through that crisis. And the only way we're going to get through that crisis is that we work together and make plans on that. Thanks, Janine.
Thank you, Chris. So just on maintenance, how often does a system need to be maintained? How often does it have to be looked at?
Cool stuff. So maintenance on the system is, you've got, okay, let's start that. You've got two installations. You've got a ground installation, ground mount installation, or you've got a rooftop installation. So let's just quickly stand still there. Your rooftop installations is your more system that's more affordable. Your installation costs on that side is not that high. So when we do get at a farmer, you will always get that they've got a quote that they want to install the systems onto the roof. Let's stop there. The warranty, the performance or the production warranty on your solar panels is 25 years. We don't have any installation in South Africa that's older than 25 years. So I don't know what that panel is going to do to that roof. Let's look at our chicken houses. I don't know what's going to happen with that. So now I've got this system that is installed on a roof. So the maintenance on the roof is going to be a big problem. If I, for instance, need to clean that panels, just normal cleaning of the panels, I need to send somebody up on that roof. I promise you, you can walk wherever you want to walk on a roof. You're going to make something happen on that roof if you walk there. First thing. So then I add maintenance to myself. The second thing is health and safety. I've got now my worker that's on that roof. If he steps on something, he falls off that roof, I've got big problems. Okay, so that's it. Let's move to ground mount installations. Ground mount installations, better maintenance wise, because this thing is on the ground, I can look at it. Safer, better production. My system is north facing, whatever. So my maintenance is a bit lower. So overall maintenance on a grid tie system that's got no generators, no batteries, nothing. Maintenance is very, very low. If I've got a fixed system, if my structure is fixed, maintenance is very low. The moment I start movement on my panels, so they call it the sunflower movement. They follow the sun as the sun falls. Then I've got a movement that's happening. The moment I've got a movement, I've got maintenance problems. So that's another thing that you need to look at. Yes, you are producing 50% more on a system that's following the sun, but is that 15% going to help me on my maintenance side at the end of that? Just to answer your question quickly, there's maintenance on a grid tie system, ground mount are very, very low.
But then we also go to battery lifespan. So I think, I presume it would depend on the size of the battery and how often it's used or whatever. But what is the battery lifespan? I was speaking to somebody the other day who had to replace their battery within about 5 years or something. I didn't want to ask why it was that soon, just in case there was opening wounds or something. Yeah. But is that common? Does battery have to replace that often?
Unfortunately, the thing is with batteries is you've got your life on a battery with, if they say if you use it exactly as they say you must use your battery, charge it, decharge it, charge it, decharge it, 80%, 20%, exactly like that. We all know on a farm, it doesn't work like that. I will stand up in the morning. I know I've got my plan set out, everything. I've got my meeting with my staff. Everything is in place. As soon as I walk out of that door, stuff happens on a farm, all the farms. Now it happens with batteries as well. Now I need to decharge, charge more. I need power. Everything is going to happen now. So now what happened with the 10-year battery, it becomes an 8-year battery, or it becomes a 7-year battery. So that's most of the problems that we've got with batteries. We are not there yet. I think personally, my opinion, I'm not going otherwise, my opinion, I don't think we are there on a full off-grid system for our farmers yet on batteries, because that's the only reason for that. We're not even chatting about the different products that we get of batteries that's in the market. We don't know what is a good one or what is not the good one. So yeah, there we've got the big problem. I can't say why it's 7 years. My reason or my opinion on that would be, when they've installed the battery, they had a plan in mind, but as soon as they implemented the battery, that plan changes exactly quickly. And that's the difference that happens. And the thing with batteries is a simple thing. There's lots of other stuff. You can't replace a battery if you've got a battery bank and there's problems with one of the batteries. You can't replace one battery. You need to replace the whole battery bank, because your battery system is only running as good as the one that's not running well. So that's what the problem. You need to replace the whole system.
Chris, I think you mentioned biogas during your presentation. Can maybe just elaborate on what the current state of biogas situation is in South Africa, but because that does seem to be perhaps, I don't know how long it's going to take, but sometime in the future to be a sort of viable option as alternative energy.
I think technically it's a viable option. We've seen, as I've said, I've seen many systems in Europe running on, actually in South African terms, very small dairy farms. But I talked to one of my engineering friends yesterday, and he said, well, at the time, the municipalities put in digesters to produce methane, actually to produce compost from the sewage, and the byproduct is methane gas. And they stopped doing it because there's the carbon tax on methane. That's what he told me. I didn't have time to check on this. I'm not sure about that. I know we do know that methane, because it got a very higher greenhouse gas equivalent than carbon dioxide. So if that's true, then that more or less limits the process. But I've really seen good systems working. I know that there was a system or two installed in South Africa. I'm not sure whether they're still working. It seems logical. You have, especially an intensive livestock farm, you have all this effluent. You can just put it in through a digester. The product they get out of the digester is a very good quality compost, and the methane gas you need off you use for heat or to run engines. It looks theoretically good, but I'm not sure why it's not being implemented.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
The carbon tax might be a part of the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Kalani, I wonder if you could perhaps elaborate on carbon credits. So just in terms of actually making some sort of money from using renewable energy. But I mean, I've read numerous articles about this, and it always seems a bit sort of airy-fairy to me, but maybe just because I don't really understand it. So could you just perhaps give your opinion on that?
Yeah, Janine, so I think we're on the same boat when it comes to carbon credits. It is a world a bit far away from me currently. It is also something that I'm still trying to get into understanding with in terms of its technicalities. I'm also reading a lot on it. It's seemingly getting a mixed reaction from the sector. On the one side, there are people who are for it and those that are still against it. But we're still studying it, well, at least I am, to kind of get the nitty-gritties and technicalities sorted. I'm not sure if Chris has looked into this, the carbon credits conversation, and if he's got maybe a view on that on his side.
Kulani, so just to add that, and we had a brief conversation yesterday with Chris on the carbon credits, so you can jump in here as well. The thing is with carbon credits is the farmer, if one farmer is too small for all the cost and the admin and the implementation and whatever the case may be on the carbon credits. So we need to look at 100+ farmers and big systems that they need to get together and build a company and do the carbon credit stuffing. Not even a 1 mega farmers in South Africa can run carbon credits. So yeah, I don't think we are anywhere, Janine, close with any carbon credits in South Africa yet. I think Chris will tell us as well there. You know, if you get a guy that's come to your farm and sell you carbon credits on your system, then yeah, ask questions.
Chris, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think on the carbon footprint issue, obviously for a farmer or for farming operation that sells to the public, being more carbon friendly or even carbon neutral is a good selling point. So we've seen cases where photovoltaic systems are put in place, not really for the cost benefit, but as it looks good if you want to sell to, sorry, I nearly named the company, but the retail company, you can tell them, look, my production is carbon neutral. So it's a good selling point.
So it's more of a selling point than an actual, like, return on anything.
Yeah, I think, it's good to be carbon neutral. And I know that some dairy companies who say they are carbon neutral. In fact, internationally, I have very good friends of mine in Italy. They run a dairy business that's carbon neutral. They became carbon neutral by, I think, forestries in Brazil. So,
Okay.
but I think the individual farmer, his bottom line is the important thing, and that bottom line must be positive. And so he can't do things because it's in the interest of the world or interest of the environment to be more carbon friendly. If it's not viable, economically viable, then it's not viable. If I just quickly, they ask an Argentinian farmer, what do you understand under sustainability? He said, sustainability equals profitability. Thanks.
Chris?
Yeah, Janine, so if I just want to add that 5 cents there to Chris, that's the only thing is it's a carbon, you can tell somebody you've got green energy installed on your farm, and there's some associations that gives you a green certificate or a green sticker that you can put on your packaging and stuff like that. So that, I think, it's positive. Do not use it. I'm not going to use it as a selling point, but if farmers are looking at something like that, that's good for the environment, it's good for their business. I've got my green sticker. I'm doing my part for the environment. I think that's the way to go for the job.
And then, Chris, I also just want to ask you, you were speaking to Kalani earlier, but just in terms of solar panel shortages and how that's affecting farmers, how stopping them basically from installing solar power.
Yeah, so we've got a big shortage on tier 1 panels currently. Just to look at it myself, we are looking at 3 months plus on panels. And so what's happening now is we've got lots of people that's bringing in not tier 1 panels at the moment. I even had lots of calls came through this week to me, people trying to sell me that panels. So the thing is, what the problem is, and please, I'm asking the farmers, please look at that. If you want to do installations now, just rather wait a couple of months for your tier 1 panels. Because if you do not install a tier 1 panel, I promise you're going to have problems. You're not going to have problems now, but you're going to have problems in the next 3 years. When that company that sold you that panels, they then long gone. You must remember now, we've got companies that are installing solar panels left, right, and center now. So they want to give you now, install the system, get their cash. It's working in a year's time, still fine, everything, but the problem is the 2nd year or the 3rd year. That's where your problem comes in. And if you do not buy tier 1 panels, that's where we're going back to Koos, where he said about maintenance. So now you're not going to have a maintenance problem. You're going to buy a whole new system because that one is not working. So Janine, we've got problems with stock on panels. They are working on it. There is not a solution at the moment, but you'll be looking at 3 months plus.
Is the shortage due to supply issues, or is it a shipping issue?
Well, and from our side, it's supply issues. So most of our guys is that there's just big orders is big coming in. And what the guys are doing as well is they are ordering for warehouse keeping. So where normally what I've done is I would have get my stuff in from them directly to the installation site. I would have kept the warehouse. Now people are stacking up on their warehouses. I don't know why. Just a quick one. If you the technology on the panels is changing so quickly. I've got examples myself where I've done installations, a 500 kilowatt system installation. I've done it. 6 months later, the farmer phoned me. He said to me, Chris, I want to add phase 2 as quickly as possible because this thing is working. When I got back to my supplier to add phase 2, that panel's changed in 6 months' time. So it doesn't help that you keep the stuff in the warehouse, because new technology is at this stage, every 6 months, it comes in. So yeah, it's a
It's a
supply.
bit like the toilet paper stocking situation that we had during the lockdown, like buy as much as you can.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, so we were talking about the environmental factor earlier, so I don't want to harp too much on about the environment, just because that's not what we're really talking about. But in terms of the environment and the recyclability of solar panels, how recyclable is it? Or are they?
I'm quickly going to jump in there because it's a very difficult question, and then Koos and Kulani can answer from there. So what I can say is it's like the banks is saying that there's a reselling value on panels. I can tell you this, I don't think there's a reselling value on panels. So I don't know, but let's see happening on that. Recycling of panels, I think that's the next big issue we're looking at. There's some health and safety stuff that needs to be in place for recycling of panels, and I don't think we've got anything. I don't think we've got anything on paper. We can't even sort out a feed-in tariff currently with that. So how are they going to sort that out? So that is our next big question that needs discussion, and we need to have a solution on that. And we don't need, or we must not wait for the next 5 years to sort that out. We must get something in place now.
Ronnie, do you want to add?
Thank you, Jenny. Yeah, so I think that's a very pertinent point that Chris is raising. I think in our, I want to say, desperation of cushioning the impact of the energy crisis, we are finding solutions for the short term without considering maybe the implications or the byproduct of these solutions in the long term. And we do know that sustainability is a big conversation that's happening globally. So when we are pushing for those solar panels and that kind of technology to come through, if it has a risk attached to it in the long run, where we then are finding that it has an environmental implication, particularly when it comes to recycling, then we really do need to have those conversations sooner rather than later, as Chris is pointing out, to sort of kind of get over that hurdle while it's still early. And this is one of the things that I noticed with South Africa, is that we're very quick to announcing things, implementing if it really does have, if implementation does really happen, because we know that the implementation is quite low in South Africa. But if it does have an implementation, we then have another conversation that has been lagging and has not been considered. I think the grey listing is another example of that we've seen, where we've had some levers in place, but we've forgotten of other levers. I don't want to go into the grey list, and that's another conversation for another day. But it's just a principle that we can extrapolate to say, while we are solving the crisis, while we are finding solutions, let's have a holistic conversation. And this is where it's important, as a matter of principle, as Chris is saying, to have the experts in the room. Call your Sonfin, call your Koos as the consultants, have a very broad, comprehensive conversation as to what are the implications of the entire value chain of the solution, and ensure that 10 years down the line, we're not finding ourselves having to then go clean up for the mess that we created a couple of years ago. Thanks, Jenny.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It seems that everyone is just sort of jumping to the solar solution, but there's not all the questions have been answered with regards to implementation. Chris, is there anything you want to add on that?
I'm jumping the queue now a bit here, but there's lots of implementation stuff that needs to be looked at, and one of the stuff is environmental as well. A simple thing is that you can't install a system 500 meters, closer than 500 meters to a river or to a dam or natural flowing of water. So people are actually like, we can jump in the car and quickly go to the Northern Cape, where we've got irrigation, big irrigation going there, and the systems are installed very close to the water flowing there, and that is going to have problems later on. Not now, but later on it's going to have problems. So we're not, so what happens is we're looking at is resolving the energy crisis now. When you do an hour, it's load shedding, whatever the case may be, but we're not looking at the environmental side as well. There is stuff that needs to be in place. You can't install a system that's bigger than a hectare. Stuff like that. If you're not working with the right EPC or the right installer, I promise you that's problems that you're going to create for yourself. If you get a guy that wants to do a deposit now, in the next 2 weeks, do the installation now, he's in a hurry, everything must be done now, done. Ask yourself questions. Then there's problems, and then there's shortcuts that they take. They do not go to Eskom for their approvals. They do not sign their contracts. They do not get their accounts or bills in place. They don't know the maintenance contract they've got in place. They don't know the environmental, have that been checked. Stuff like that. And that does not get sorted out in a week, 2, 3 weeks. That does not get sorted out like that. It takes weeks, months to sort stuff out like that. And if that's where the problem is, people want to do everything now and then they leave that bit.
Yeah, people cutting corners. Kwani, I just want to move on to the livestock sector just very quickly. Also read an article the other day that was talking about possible feed shortages because of load shedding affecting feed mills. I'm not sure how true that information is, so I don't want to make any grand claims. But have you seen any indication of a possible shortage of feed? Are you aware of any of that?
So I think, Janine, that challenge when it comes to supply is widespread. It's not just on the feed side of things. Yes, that is one of the examples that we've heard of, but it also spreads across to other forms of commodities and other aspects of the value chain itself. And I think the more pronounced and the widely famous one that we saw recently was with the KFC situation, where some of the KFC closed down because they couldn't get enough chicken into their shops. When you then trace back and work backwards, you realize that actually it is the supply from the ground, from the primary producer couldn't produce enough chickens to supply to KFC because of load shedding and the implications thereof. But those are just some of the examples that we've had. We've seen the dairy farmers also struggling, sugarcane, maize, everyone has been struggling. And I think when we saw, especially with stage 6, escalating to stage 6, it was at a time where the maize farmers were also quite concerned because it was a heat wave for that week or two, if I'm not mistaken. And at that particular time, the maize was at a very critical point of growing, and they needed irrigation of sorts in the absence of rain in that particular regard. So the principle has been pronounced. I'm actually trying to find the stats as we speak here on just some of the importance or just the losses that have been incurred, or rather the threats to the sectors. And looking at the data that we have right here, if we consider maybe for the fruit guys, they have come under threat. Their value of about 20 billion or plus, or more than that, has been under threat because of load shedding. The maize guys were sitting around 10 billion, sugarcane just under 10 billion as well. We have wheat as well. So I think the principle, and in as much as we've heard the stories in maybe disjointed efforts, we have seen that kind of impact already playing out in the sector. I remember when we started the conversation earlier on, I noted that for the first 9 months of 2022, there was a 23 billion already lost by the sector because of load shedding. And this was even before stage 6. I started to think what the impact is now that we've had stage 6 leading up to where we are today. And again, I think one of the things is that it has ripple effects to other parts of the conversation. When you talk about employment, the sector is very, very labor intensive. So there's about 800,000 jobs that come under risk because of this load shedding conversation, when farmers cannot then sustainably grow or participate or continue in their business ventures. There's also food security issues. We don't want to be and I don't want to create panic with this comment to say now we're going to be having shortage of food or anything like that. We're not there yet. We're not there yet, but it's worth noting that should the situation not get any better without viable solutions, then food security will come under threat. And I started to think that if we now become a country that's importing most of our food, how much that would cost. especially for the low income households in this regard, and the affordability then becomes an issue in this regard. So yeah, the conversation is playing out. We are seeing struggles in some parts of the sector itself. We're not at a stage where we need to be pressing the alarms. And I like what Chris is saying, that yes, we have a crisis right now, but breathe, let's take a step back. How do we then solve the solution sustainably in this regard? So while we do have the shortages, while we do have the challenges, we're not at that stage where we need to be pressing any panic buttons as a sector entirely. Thank you, Jenny.
I just finally, before we go to the questions that's been asked by some of the delegates. So we've spoken a lot about renewable energy installation and implementation, etc. But all of this obviously costs money. And I think the bigger concern is for small scale farmers who find it difficult to access finance at the best of times. And, you know, what solutions there could be for them, especially if they cannot actually afford or get access to finance to afford renewable energy.
Yeah, so Jenny, sorry, can I jump in there?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. Yeah, so that is a very pertinent matter that we also looking at as Agri-SA. We are fortunate enough to also be having that kind of a conversation with the financing houses, the Banking Association of South Africa for one, where we've noted this particular stance. And on one side, the banks have given commitment of just alluded to the fact that they're now considering solutions or products that are aimed at this particular intervention, particular solution to help their farmers, whether they are on the books or if it's new farmers that are coming on. But I think that conversation is still very much steered towards the big guys who have the financial muscle to actually take up that kind of debt into their own books. On the smaller scales or small scale kind of farmers and the smallholder farmers, the conversation that we're having with the ministers, respectively, between the Minister of Agriculture as well as the Minister of Electricity, with the dotted line to the Treasury as well, is to look at the current blended finance scheme that has already been launched to see how that can also be amended or augmented to kind of speak to that kind of incentive of sorts. Yes, we have noted the rebate system. It has its benefits. It has its limitations in terms of the cash flow side of things. But we are looking at what already is in the kitty. And I think, again, without creating panic, we seriously and speedily need to deal with the situation of the energy crisis, whether it has an impact on the finances. What do we then have on the table that we can use currently to see how we then best find a solution in the short term, or do we then need to introduce something different in the longer term? But those are kind of conversations that are happening between organizations like Agri-SA with the relevant stakeholders, whether it's the banking sector, whether it's the ministers and government in itself, or just other maybe even foreign financing houses, if they would be interested in this kind of conversation.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think we can move on to the questions and answers. Oh, well, you're going to give the answers. I'm going to ask the questions from the delegates. Sorry, I'm just reading. So one of the delegates says one of the processes not mentioned yet is the authorization process from the Department of Environmental Affairs. This needs to be conducted prior to installation of most systems and involves input from multiple specialists and can take up to 18 months to conclude. So there's no actual question there, but is that true? Can it take that long? And do you need an environment assessment before you can have any of renewable energy things implemented, Chris?
Janine, yes. So if you need to do an impact study, a basic impact study on the system, it can take 18 months, true. But there's ways that you can go around and say, if your system is not bigger than a hectare, it doesn't need to do a basic assessment. If you're not close to water, you don't need to do a basic assessment. So what you need to do is you need to go to the Act. You need to see what is the do and don'ts on that and just keep away from it. If you can't keep away from it, then you need to follow it, unfortunately. I had this 8 years ago in the Northern Cape where the farmer wanted to skip the basic assessment. And I said to him, my words to him, everybody's going to see that you're going to be the first guy that's installing a solar system. At some stage, somebody's going to start asking questions. Not now, but at some stage. And he was not happy with me. He said to me, Chris, it's costing me money, it's taking long, all that stuff. And we sit and I actually begged him to do the basic assessment. And then roughly 8 years ago, and then now 6 months ago at 9 o'clock at night, I received an email from him and a WhatsApp. He said, Chris, please react to this email. And there they were on him. They asked him, where's your basic assessment? We want to see that. If you can't give it to me in the next 24 hours, 10 million rand penalty or 10 years in imprisonment. So that's happening there. It's on the outside. So what I want to add to that is what's happening with Eskom now as well. So what the farmers are saying, I'm not going to do approvals of Eskom. I'm not going to follow that process. We had now an incident in the Northern Cape where there were a farmer killed on a solar farm. There's going to be stuff getting out of there. I hope for that install and everything, the processes was followed. But if the process is not followed, I promise you it's going to have a ripple effect and it's going to have big problems. So yeah, follow your processes and follow your environmental process. If you need to do it, please do it.
Again, people shouldn't take shortcuts. Like they have to follow the processes, even if it takes 2 years. Kalani, sorry, yeah, you wanted to add?
Yeah, sorry. Thanks, Janine. And I think maybe another principle in there, in as much as with what Chris is saying, is that it also shows the frustration that is already out there to say that the processes that have also been put in place are also quite tedious because of just how elongated they can become, and just how much is required. Yes, they need to be done, but on the one hand, from a government point of view or from the relevant stakeholder, maybe the regulator, these processes need to also be sped up from their side in terms of approval and just giving the right approvals in this regard. Let me maybe just give you another example in this whole conversation. We have noted in place right now that one of the tariff structures that Eskom has is that because of the farming community happening in the rural areas, which is normally maybe quite far away from generating plants of Eskom, it costs Eskom to provide electricity to those parts of the country. So in place, what they have done then is that they've had a tariff structure that they've put in place, a rural flex, for example, which then speaks to Eskom having to account for that cost of electricity getting to that part. But what is attached to that tariff structure is that the farmers would then need to use the electricity or high usage of electricity off peak from the entire grid so that it doesn't strain the grid in this regard. It's all good and well in terms of in its principle, but unfortunately with the load shedding situation, what we have found is that then during off-peak times, the farmers then are not able to irrigate in those particular times, and they're forced then to come onto the peak season or the peak usage hours. And what that then attracts for the farmers is a higher tariff structure, which is like 4 rand per kilowatt or something that are saying to be corrected. And this is unsustainable. Now we've had a conversation with Eskom to say, now let's consider an alternative tariff structure that will then represent and reflect the current climate that we're finding ourselves with. The response we got from Eskom is that any form of tariff, whether it's an introduction of a new tariff, whether you're amending a current tariff or you're removing a tariff, we need to go to the regulator, which is NERSA. Now we know those processes can take anything of 6 to 18 months sometimes. In fact, there are still tariffs that are sitting at NERSA that have been there since 2015, have not been reacted on, whether it's an approval or a rejection. And that just tells you how dire the situation is in terms of the timeframes and how the processes as well are quite tedious. So I note the question and I get the frustration. And yes, in principle, I'm agreeing with Chris to say, please do the processes because you want to avoid any backlash at the end of the time. But there's a conversation that needs to be had with government and with the regulators to say they also need to clean up the act and ensure that when people are complying, they're also met with good service delivery as a principle. Thank you, Jenny.
Absolutely. Chris, you wanted to add something?
Janine, just what I want to add there is, if one of the points that you can check if your system is applying to all the stuff from Eskom, one of the points is Ruraflex. So you are not allowed to connect any solar system on Eskom's network if your tariff structure is not Ruraflex. So if you've got any other tariff structure, Night Safe Rural, Land Rate 1, 2, 3, whatever it is, if you've got that tariff structure and you've got a solar system connected on, it doesn't matter where your solar system is connected, before your DB, actual transformer, wherever it's connected. If you do not have a Ruraflex installed or implemented, then your system is illegally connected on the Eskom network.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just reading again. So another attendee said, the off-grid, what are the disadvantages of an off-grid system? And then he or she said, considering all hurdles with the grid system, the off-the-grid system looks much easier. Chris, I don't know if you want to elaborate that, or elaborate on that.
Yes.
So what is an off-the-grid system? Does that mean that you're entirely off the grid?
No.
Okay.
Yes. So off-grid is off-grid. There's no network. You don't have Eskom, you don't have anything there. No municipality, there's no network running there. You've got batteries, or you've got a generator, or you've got a combination of a solar system, a generator, and batteries, and no network. No network. And that is where the problem starts in, because now if we look at a normal irrigation farm that's got 2 pivots or 3 pivots of a 20 hectare and a 30 hectare and a 40 hectare, and you want to implement off-grid systems, that's where the problem starts kicking in, because you need to have people sitting there knowing how your farm is running, how your irrigation is farming, what's happening if the sun is shining too much, the rain is too heavy, or whatever the case may be. And then you need to implement that strategy there. Where off-grid systems can work is small installations, house holdings, your farm. You've got a small farm, like a weekend farm. Let's call it a weekend farm that you go to, and you don't want to have electricity or anything. That's where off-grid systems is working, and because it is small. Just to add to any authorization, approval, anything, you don't need to say anything to anybody, get any approval from anybody if you've got an off-grid system. If there's no Eskom network, no municipality network, then you implement a solar system with a generator and batteries, you don't need to get authorization, application, approval, whatever from anybody.
So it's easier to install, but it's not necessarily practical for a farm, big farm.
Well, I don't think so. I haven't done an installation off-grid for an irrigation farm as yet. I've done so much designing and so much planning, and actually I'm the one that's always asking 7 questions in that front of that farmer, because I know that I need to go back to him at some stage. And if that thing is not working, he's going to ask me the question. He said to me, but you are the guy that designed the system. So if you know that that farmer can contact you in 3 years time, or 3 years time, or 4 years time, saying, but my batteries is not working, you said 10 years and whatever, and you are happy and you can go back and you can fix that problem without asking that farmer anything, then you'll do it. But if you can't do that, then stay away.
Okay. One of the attendees asked about the rebate that you might get from SARS. So he or she says that if, let's say, the value of installing a PV panel with the wiring and whatever, clamps, everything else, is 5,600 Rand, how much rebate would you get from SARS? So I think the question there mostly is just what is the value of the rebate is in percentage wise, or is it a flat rate?
So from what we've heard from the budget speech from the minister, I think when you're a business, you can claim up to 125% of the cost of your unit that you've set up, with no limitation on the size there too. And then when it comes to households and the individuals, I think the maximum they kept it to was to up to 15,000. So I think you can claim up to that amount. I'm just not too sure on the percentage attached to the individuals adjacent to the 15,000 cap that they've placed for the households.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, Chris.
Can I just ask? I haven't seen the detail. The minister's budget speech is just a budget speech. So I haven't seen a publication from SARS detailing these yet. I'm not sure. I haven't seen it yet. So until that's in printed, we won't know how it will work. So just wait a bit on that also.
Okay. Okay. So I can't see any other questions. I think those are all. Unless there's some questions on social media. But no, okay, it doesn't look like there are. So I think we'll call it there then. Thank you very much to all our panelists. I think you have given us much to think about, and I've certainly learned quite a lot. Would you guys like to give any final words or anything like that? Start with Chris.
Yeah, I'm going to end off exactly like I started. Relax. Don't panic, please. Don't panic. Don't run to the closest guy, or the nearest guy, or your friend, or don't even run to the bank. Just relax and ask yourself the question 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. And make sure that when you want to go this route, that what is implemented are for you, not like your friend or copy and paste from your friend, but what is going to work for you. And that's what I want to end with. Thanks, Janine.
Thank you, Chris. Chris?
Yes, I think, first of all, I agree with Chris. Don't panic. Don't do things in a panic. And I was an economist. I would advise people not to buy stuff when it's in high demand. And at this stage, there's a huge demand for photovoltaic systems. So just relax on that. I think for a farmer, some type of standby system, expensive diesel driven, fine, but that is becoming an imperative. Unfortunately, these things are expensive. So, but on the photovoltaic systems, take your time, do your research, talk to the people who's been in this business for a long time, talk to Agri-SA or to your other agriculture organization, find out who are the people who supply the things and who are proper and been in business for a time with good sorry, my English is getting used up, with reliable systems. Thank you. But thank you for the opportunity to talk about it.
Thank you, Chris. Kulani?
Yeah, thank you, Janine. Thank you for the opportunity and for the great session. I will just lurch into what was said at the end to say, talk to your Agri-SA, talk to your farming organization. There are conversations that are happening. Where I sit, I'm quite optimistic, knowing exactly what is happening behind the doors. I know that there are solutions that are being presented, and there are solutions that are thought out. I know Chris, I can either pick up my phone anytime and say, Chris, this is what we're thinking about as Agri-SA, inform us from a technical point of view, and his expertise help us. But also when we miss the mark, he also calls us and says, hey, guys, you've missed that mark in that particular conversation. So there is that kind of expertise, there's collaboration that is happening from the policy to the technical experts. And now we're actually seeing from government as well. It's hard to believe, but government is actually listening even more than they did before. So there are things, it is quite tough. We have an appreciation and acknowledgement of that, but we're here now. We need to fix it. And that's what we are doing. I'm quite optimistic, and I know that we'll get over this hurdle. So with that, we just want to say thank you very much, Jenny, for this opportunity again. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us for this webinar. We hope to see you in the next one, which I think will be around 2 weeks from now, if I'm not mistaken, which will be on cannabis production and legislation. So please join us for that. And I'm sure we will have this conversation again at some point, because it's such a hot topic and it seems to be quite complicated. But thank you very, very much to all our delegates and all our panelists, and have a good day and a good weekend, and keep safe. Bye.
Thank you.